What's going on, YouTube? This is Boxingwave. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All right. Just gonna make a video, just talking. Basically, I want to respond to some of the comments, but I'm gonna be talking more and more about the sport in general. Because I think I made a video the other day. I made it the other day, but I uploaded it yesterday about Terrence Crawford and the IBF and the whole Jerome Boots Ennis situation. All right. And I read a lot of the comments, and sometimes I think with people in general, not just with boxing, but I think people fail to look at the bigger picture. I think people think it's as simple as the IBF stripped him when he just won the title. I don't think it's that simple, and I was trying to break that down in my video, right? And I don't think it's as simple as whether or not Boots is ducking Crawford or Crawford ducking Boots. I don't think it's that simple. You know what I mean? I think some of the things that us boxing fans demand sometimes is beneficial for the fighter that you like. And sometimes it's not beneficial for them. You know what I mean? But what I do know is that boxing, we could all agree that boxing is a very corrupt sport. It's inconsistent. There's a lot of things that can change the outcome of the fight or change whether or not, like, whether we get certain fights at the time that we want them. There's just a lot of stuff involved in boxing. You know what I mean? We get news every day, and most of the news are rumors. All right. Now we don't have just journalists. We have social media. You know what I mean? We have content creators like myself. We could put out whatever bit of information, and people will go out and argue about it. It'll go viral. Other content creators will jump on it. There's a lot of things that affect everything, and I think that's the problem when it comes to boxing and things in general. Even when you're like talking about politics, people will have one specific issue and they think that one issue would change everything, or it'll make the sport much better. And what I'm going to talk about is how several things need to get better to fix one problem. And I think that is the biggest issue when it comes to this situation with Crawford and other examples that I'm going to give you. Right? Yes, boxing is corrupt, and you have the sanctioning bodies that are not consistent. The IBF is and has been probably the strictest sanctioning body over the years, right? Since I started really focusing on like making content and paying attention to the rankings and the rules and stuff, the IBF has been the most strict sanctioning body. They're more likely to strip you than the other three. You know what I mean? But they're not perfect, and there are inconsistencies. And this video is not about defending the IBF and their decision to strip Terrence Crawford, because they're inconsistent. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure there's things that go behind the scenes that we don't know about that is kind of corrupt, because it's about money at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Anything about money, there's going to be a little corruption behind it. There's going to be moves that are made behind the scenes that probably shouldn't happen. But the IBF, I wasn't defending them in my last video, nor am I defending them now. But what I do know and I am aware is them stripping Crawford as quickly as they did is not the only problem here. And it's not the only thing that affects this decision that was made or caused this decision to be made. The bigger problem, in my opinion, the sanctioning bodies suck, right? And there shouldn't be four of them. We all say we wish there was one champion. Once upon a time, there was one undisputed champion. Now it's disputable. It's more disputable now that we have four major titles. But the rematch clauses, let's start there. The rematch clauses have become one of the biggest problems in boxing today. All right, because it's guaranteed now. Before it was like, yes, the super cash cows or the super pay-per-view guys or the major names in the boxing. Yes, a lot of them had this in place in contract in writing when having certain fights. It's insurance for the bigger names, just in case they lose the fight, especially if they are the favorite to win. If they lose it, they run it back, they get a chance to run it back. But the problem with today, you got guys that are implementing rematch clauses whenever they're somewhat the bigger name, you know what I mean? Or whenever, they're a champion, you know what I mean? Not so much in the smaller divisions like under 126, but a lot in the divisions 130 and up, maybe, okay? 135 and up, with the bigger names. And it's an issue. It's a bigger issue right now. Why? Because you're slowing up the division. We have a year, right? And most of these fighters, especially the bigger names, more popular guys, they're only fighting once a year. So when you have a rematch clause, you're like taking up like 2 years, maybe. You know what I mean? Before we even get to your mandatory, or whoever's up next to fight for that title. You're taking up time because you're not active enough, and the outcome of this big fight is slowing up everything because we can't move forward without this rematch happening. So you have Crawford and Spence, who are supposed to be fighting again. You had Wilder and Fury. Look how long that took. Wilder was dominated in the rematch, but we went so long deciding, trying to figure out what was next. What was next? We thought it was going to be Joshua Fury. But then it was a whole thing with the deadline when it comes to the rematch clause, and we had the pandemic. Everything was just crazy. It was madness, right? But you're holding up the heavyweight division by all of this. You know what I mean? Because we're waiting on a super fight, an undisputed fight. And now this rematch clause is blocking everything. You know what I mean? You had Joshua and Usyk right after 1 and 2. 3 titles are on the line, and you got guys that's waiting in line like Joe Joyce at the time before he lost to Zhang. Hergovich was up there too somewhere. You got a lot of things that rematch clause affects everything and slows everything down. You know what I mean? It's one of them things that's slowing everything down. And, when it comes to the rematch clauses, that's something that you and the fighter agreed on. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with the sanctioning body. They still have their mandatories. You know what I mean? So just because you, Crawford, and you, Spence, decided and agreed for you to have a rematch clause, there's already guys waiting in line, including Jerron Boots Ennis. So just because you two decided and agreed on a rematch clause in order to make the fight, everybody else shouldn't have to suffer. It's bad enough that, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many other things that can cause a delay of a fight. And Errol Spence is a perfect example because of the car accident, because of eye injuries and stuff like that. Then the next fighter that you're waiting to fight gets a fight in while they're waiting for the outcome of your fight, which is what's happening with Spence and in Crawford. Because I want to stay active, you want to stay active, I want to stay active. All of these things are holding up the next fighters coming up. You know what I mean? And people are not looking at how dangerous and destructive these rematch clauses are when it comes to fighters trying to make their legacy. You know what I mean? And then sometimes you're waiting for your shot just for the fighter that you're waiting for decides to just move up or vacate the title. There's too many fighters that I can name, but look at Jamal Charlo's situation. He's been a WBC champion. I don't think he's fought in He hasn't fought in over 2 years. They won't strip him. Carlos Adames is the interim champ, but he just is not getting his shot. He has his own legacy that he's trying to get and achieve. But he has to wait because the WBC is not going to strip him. You know what I mean? Because of whatever he's going through. Right? Look at Tim Tszú's situation with Jamel in 154. It's a mess because Bakram was his mandatory too before the Castano rematch. And you got to remember, being that most people felt that Castano probably won the first fight, even though it was close. A lot of people wanted the rematch immediately, and they thought that the Bakram fight was a way for Jamel Charlo to get out of a rematch with Castano. Just remember the first reaction after that fight. Bakram immediately, Mando. That no one knows who Bakram is. All right? But he's the mandatory. And whether it was step aside or whatever they did in order to make sure they had that rematch go down and get us undisputed, let's be honest with ourselves. We know what fight we wanted first. The majority of us wanted the rematch with Castano and Jamel Charlo. We didn't want Bakram against Jamel Charlo before Castano. We didn't want that. We wanted these two champions to fight each other first. You know what I mean? And this was a point that I brought up the other day with Errol Spence. People are bringing the point up as if they wanted to see the mandatory get their shot first. Sometimes the Mando is the bigger fight or the more difficult opponent than the other champion. But what I will say is, like, and I brought up Spence. If you didn't watch the video, I brought up that Abdul Kakarov was the number one ranked fighter with the IBF, right? For some time, like 2 or 3 years. He loses to Cody Crowley, right? So now he's not the number one guy. And then Boots find a way by beating Roman Villa to become the Mando. I don't know if he was the Mando before that fight, but I know he wasn't the Mando for that long. I suggested that Boots and Crowley should fight for the IBF, being that Crowley beat Abdul Kakarov, and being that Jaron Ennis is the other high-ranking guy. But Jaron Ennis is champion now. But people are saying Spence has not defended that IBF title against the mandatory since Alcampo, which was like 4 or 5 years ago. All right, cool. He didn't. You're right. But why are you bringing up the point as if you wanted to see Spence fight Abu Kakarov over Danny Garcia or over Sean Porter or over your Dennis Ugas or over even Terrence Crawford? No, Terrence Crawford and Spence was the fight. So my point is, rematch clauses shouldn't oversee like rematch clauses shouldn't be the thing that keeps you from being stripped. Am I saying that right? Rematch clauses should have no effect on whether you keep the title. It shouldn't have no effect. That's not a sanctioning body thing. A rematch clause is something you two created amongst yourselves. Now, unification, okay, you guys are unifying or fighting for undisputed. Let's let these guys that's in the Mandos hold off. If these guys can become legendary by becoming undisputed, let them get their shot. But a rematch clause that you agreed on, no, we should not hold the rest of the division up because you guys decided amongst yourselves that you're going to run it back. Because now you're holding up everybody else in their legacy. Who did Spence hold up when he was the IBF champ? Who did he hold up? Abu Kakarov? Well, who did Abu Kakarov beat? Who wanted that fight? No one was asking for the fight. Spence was unifying. You know what I mean? Now, this is the thing with boxing fans. We got to make a decision. What do you really want? Do you want all sanctioning bodies to be strict and consistent? Because you know what that means. If they're consistent with their mandatories and their schedules, no one would become undisputed. Why? Because no one's active enough. And the more belts that you win by unifying, the more mandatory obligations you're going to have. And if you're only fighting once a year, even if you're fighting twice a year, you still may get stripped. So you guys, again, I understand it's very confusing because what makes this so difficult is that we have 4 sanctioning bodies. And another thing you got to understand is that when you become the champion, sometimes you're picking up the baggage of the last fighter that was champion if you are to become the new champion, which is what happened with Crawford. See, he became champion, but now you're dealing with the baggage because now you have all 4 titles. And if there was step-asides previously, if there was obligations that previous champion had like Spence, now you're stuck with them because you just became the champion. But we held off the IBF. For the people that saying the IBF wasn't strict with Spence, but they're strict with Bud, they held off. Why? Because we all wanted the super fight. You guys are forgetting that point. I know it doesn't mean anything to you now because you already seen the fight. We already know the outcome. But just because these guys are running it back doesn't mean that everybody else has to suffer. Tim Tszú's waiting. What if Tim Tszú didn't stay active while Jamel kept rescheduling? Then he would be slowing his career down. So he did the right thing, and he had the privilege to be able to schedule fights as quickly as possible. So he took 3 quick fights, good ones, while waiting for Jamel. But guess what? Is he going to fight Jamel? Probably not. Is Jamel even going to come back down to 154 to defend those titles? We don't even know. But you've been sitting around here waiting for your shot. Baccaran's been sitting around waiting for his shot. And this guy might not even fight at 154 again. Is that fair? Because you decided to go and fight Canelo? And any of us would understand you taking undisputed opportunity over the mandatory, or you going up to fight the biggest cash cow in boxing over you. So yeah, a fighter would understand. Tim clearly understood based on his interviews. If you got an opportunity to fight Canelo, go for it. But as far as your legacy is getting slowed up because you have to wait even longer to fight for a title. And that's what's happening to Carlos Adames or Baccaran or anyone at the heavyweight division waiting for Usyk and Fury to fight. This guy, what's his name? Hrgovic. He's like, I'm not waiting for any more step-asides. So in order for things to get better, you guys got to understand, for things to get better, many things got to change. The sanctioning bodies, if they get more strict, you got to understand that may affect some super fights. Or it may not affect the super fights, but it will affect what titles are on the line for the super fights. Fury and Usyk could still fight each other, but it won't be undisputed if they were more strict. You know what I mean? Like, I say that right now about Better BF and Bivol. You guys don't have to fight for undisputed. We already know you two are the best guys. You don't have to fight for undisputed. The WBC won't allow it. They won't sanction it. Do it without him. Why keep the belt if they don't want two Russian fighters to fight for undisputed? You guys can still fight. You don't have to wait on them. So my point really is a lot of things are going to affect. A lot of things need to change in order to make things better. We can't just pick apart one problem. Another thing is the fighters, it's not just the sanction bodies to get more strict on their rules. The fighters have to stop taking step aside money because you're taking, I know you are allowing other fighters to go on, and I know you're getting a free check, but you are making a decision to say, I'll take it for this time, but the next time I really want the fight. Well, the next time is a rematch clause that got activated. Or the next time might not be the next time for you because that extra fight you took while you were a mandatory already, you just lost that fight. So now you don't got that opportunity no more. Ask Joe Joyce. Meanwhile, there's guys that you beat, like Daniel Dubois, that slips right past you, corruption, and gets an opportunity at a title before you do. What the hell did Daniel Dubois do? This is what I mean. A lot of things need to change in order for things to be better. And when you have rematch clauses for sanctioning bodies, less active fighters, top tier fighters with big names, champions. All right. When you got all of these things, and plus you got money to be made, super fights to happen, put it all on the line. You know what I mean? You got to understand that if the sport was better, like politically, you know what I mean? It would take away some things too. And some of the fights you might want, you might have to wait for anyway. Because there are certain ranks that you got to fight. Some guys that are highly ranked that are just not as popular. So when it comes to this Crawford Spence situation, I wasn't mad at him being stripped because he accomplished the mission by beating the one guy that people thought was going to beat him. And that was Errol Spence. And the problem is, people are like, all right, we're done. It was an easy job. He got him out of there. People want to forget and move on and bring on the next guy. There's always going to be a next guy. And Boots is the next guy. He's the next boogeyman. You know what I mean? And Crawford gets stripped. Why? Because he's taking on the baggage of another fighter that held the belt for so long that at some point the IBF had to put their foot down. Meanwhile, you got guys like Stan Jonas who been the mandatory. Like him and Ugas at one point were like both mandatories at one point. There was like a whole mix up and mess on who was the higher mando. It was so confusing because the WBA and the WBC, they have so many titles. To have world title, super title, interim title, and then Mando at the same time. It's a lot going on with the division. I mean, with each title, and it causes confusion. You know what I mean? Especially when injuries occur and fighters back out. It's just too much. It's too much. So fighters, stop taking step aside. The opportunity comes, go for it. And if they try to box you out because they want to make a bigger money fight, petition. That's what the WBC said to Devin Haney when they made Lomachenko franchise. It's like, yo, we told you could have petitioned. Why didn't you? This is what I mean. This is why I question, did Boots really, really want the fight? How bad did you want it? You know what I mean? How bad did you want it? You already ranked WBO. You were high there. Why'd you move? Why'd you switch to IBF? Did you know because you felt like the IBF was going to be available? That's a valid argument. How bad did you really want the fight? If you really want the fight, you got to go all the way. And a lot of these guys take step asides or they allow things to happen out behind the scenes. You know how much stuff that probably happens that's unreported? You know how many fights that are made because someone behind the scene, another fighter behind the scene, backdoor, but publicly didn't say anything about it? It happens all the time. I'm sure it does. But yeah, it's just a lot, man. And you know, I've accepted boxing to be what it is. It gets draining sometimes because it's kind of like a toxic sport. But at the same time, when we get the fights and it's a good fight, it's one of the best things in the world. I love it. We love it. You know what I mean? We love this shit. But I think sometimes you got to sit back and just like, we can't be so angry about every single thing that goes down. Some of these things are out of our control. And sometimes you got to look at the bigger picture, man. Like, yo, this one thing you claim you want and this one thing that you're complaining about, there's a lot of things that need to change in order for this to not happen again. If you want consistency from a sanctioning body, that may affect some of the things that you love and want, especially for the fighters that you support the most. Some of these Mandos are trash. Avni Yildirim was trash. But he was a Mando. Why? I don't know. But Canelo fought him. And everybody defended that. Why? Because it needed to be done. Because that's what they created. This is the guy. Not even coming off of a win. It happens a lot. And some fighters, yes, they are privileged because of who they are. There are privileges. No one's above criticism. Everybody did something to manipulate their way to the top or to stay there because of who they were. There are certain privileges that you get. You know what I mean? So, this whole thing with Boots and Crawford, it's not the worst. It's not the end of the world. We're supposed to be getting a rematch, whether it's at 147, 154. Again, I brought up the rematch clause, so I don't even know why people are outraged by it. Rematch clause should not slow things down. We slowed it down enough just to make this big fight and made it undisputed. That was a gift. I said this the other day in my last video. I got what I wanted as a boxing fan. I wanted these two to fight for undisputed. I got what I wanted. I think we got what we all said that we wanted. Now him getting stripped. All right, well, the rematch don't have to be for undisputed. It doesn't have to be. And if these guys, if either one of them really wants it after their fight, their rematch, they can go back and get it. Stay at 147 and fight Boots if they want it. But I'm not mad at the IBF at this situation because what were the other options? Spence defending against Boots before Crawford? Or Spence defending against Abu Kakarov or Cody Crowley? No, I don't want that. I didn't want that at no point leading up to Crawford. I wanted Crawford. But now that the fight is done, take the belt. And if they want it, they can run it with Boots after. Or they can do what they've both been saying that they're going to do and move up. Both been saying it. Especially Spence, he's been saying it for years. Do I want the rematch? No, I don't want a rematch. Was one of the easier picks for me recently in recent years. One of the best picks, easiest picks. Crawford by KO. He did exactly what I did, and he made it look even easier than I thought it was going to be. Do I want a rematch? No. Would I would love to see the Boots fight over a Spence rematch? Absolutely. But this man has been saying, I am not staying at 147. I am looking to become undisputed in another division. So why are people shocked? Oh, it's the timing. All right, well, the timing, we don't pass the belt to the new champion so the same thing can happen again. If Spence hasn't had to defend against Amando in 4 or so years, why do you want the next fighter to go and hold on to the title when he's told us he has no interest in staying in the division? Make sense out of that. I don't think it's that difficult. And I don't think it's that serious. But if it is, let's be consistent as boxing fans. Because you know what that means when this kind of thing changes. And we prioritize the Mandos over everything else. Mando should prioritize agreed upon rematch clause. Sometimes the sanctioning bodies order a rematch because of the controversial outcome. That's different. But agreeing beforehand that no matter how this fight goes, that we're going to get a rematch when a fighter got dominated? No. We don't even know if the fight is going to really happen or where it's going to happen. We don't even know. The PBC doesn't have a home after this year unless they find a new one by next year. All right. I know it's a long video. Like I said, I was going to talk about a bunch of things, but I don't know. I just felt like talking. All right. And I brought these points up before in past where I'm probably live or just rant about the sport of boxing. All these points I brought up, especially the rematch clause, is becoming a real problem. I know we like to talk about the pay-per-views and the sanctioning bodies and the corruption and promoters, all that stuff, networks, yeah. But the rematch clause thing is a problem, bro. It's a real problem. And it's a problem right now with those two. But it's a problem. It's been a problem at heavyweight in recent years. Wilder, Fury, Usyk, Joshua, just holding shit up. And guys be in line, front, and maneuvered. I talked about that. All right, but anyway, that's my video, man. I'm gonna definitely make this Shakur Stevenson, Edwin De Los Santos breakdown next. Again, subscribe to the channel, smash the like button if you like it. Leave comments, bring up points. That's what we're about. And I like to read the comments, man. I like to hear your points. All right, but let's be adults. Let's be adults. Stop being so emotional. And even though this sport sucks sometimes, we don't have to be outraged about every single thing that happens. We don't have to be. All right. Anyway, I'm out. Peace.